All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our preview and prediction for the 2025 Syracuse Orange college football team. One of this coaching staff, Fran Brown, back for an encore year two after a phenomenal 10-win campaign in his debut season. Jeff Nixon and Mike Johnson will be offensive coordinators. Robert White, Elijah Robinson will be the defensive coordinators. Top 50 in the offseason when it comes to recruiting. And of course, caps things off by winning the Holiday Bowl. They also knocked Miami effectively out of the college football playoff in the season finale with the victory there in the Dome. So monumental season for Syracuse. Get things started with this offense. This is a big reason why, Nick, last year we expected the Qs to be a really good team. I don't think we anticipated 10 wins. We also anticipated a great offense, but maybe not to the tune of, the top-ranked passing attack in the country. We thought Kyle McCord was going to be tremendous. So we hit the nail on the head with that one. But I didn't think we, again, expected he would have a record-setting season. And now he's going to be given the keys to Steve Angeli, who Notre Dame, we thought he was going to be the starter there this upcoming season after what he did in the bowl game. And instead he's going to get, beat out by a younger cat. But I think Angeli's going to fit this system perfectly. This is a guy who showcased nice poise and ability to lead them to a score late in that first half in the Orange Bowl. Other tape showcases a nice arm. He can get it downfield with no issue. Pretty good mobility. Two things really stood out, though. Knows where he wants to go with the football, and he's very, very calm and confident in the pocket. He was back there for numerous seconds, or had collapsing pockets often, and he didn't panic. Kept eyes downfield and made good throws. He is going to really impress this year if he can fire into tight windows often with accuracy. That's something McCord was tasked with a lot last year. I think Angeli is another perfect scheme fit, Nick, and I don't want to, toot the horn too early, but I think this is another great find by Brown and company.
I was quite high on Kyle McCord being the quarterback for Syracuse last year. I thought he got a bad deal at Ohio State. They got ran out of town unfairly. I really thought that was kind of cruel by the fan base and the coaching staff. I thought he was a really talented player, and he even exceeded my expectations. I did not think he would throw for 4,700 yards and 34 touchdowns. It was really solid. He threw the ball, almost 600 times. They slinged the rock a lot last year, and that was a really big deal. And now replacing him obviously is going to be difficult because he was such a talented player. Hopefully they, cut down on the turnovers. That was a bit of an issue for him last year. But overall, I was super impressed with Kyle McCord, a great guy as well. That was really solid in the locker room. Now you have Steve Angeli, who looks like he's going to beat out Ricky Collins, who was also a transfer in this room previously of LSU. There had been some concerns in upstate New York. Some of the people I know that I talked to in the media up there were concerned about Ricky Collins as the starting quarterback. It seemed like the coaching staff didn't love what they were seeing in him. Potentially that's also why Trevor Pena, who was a top wide receiver for this team last year, ended up transferring late in the cycle, leaving the program, which is certainly a big blow at wide receiver. So they went out and grabbed somebody. They bring in Steve Angeli, who I think was a phenomenal lad. He comes from Bergen Catholic in New Jersey, one of the top tier programs in high school football in the Northeast, a really talented program in New Jersey. At 6'3", 205, I think he's really solid in the pocket, really good arm. We saw it in certain moments there, at 6 of 7 for 85% comp rate for 40 yards in the bowl game, the drive he ended up stepping into. Also, had some decent completions against Florida State in limited reps. Same thing against Purdue. He had 2 touchdowns in that one on limited garbage time minutes. I think he's a player that could really step up. They obviously didn't really like what they saw in Ricky Collins, even though I thought Collins could have been a serviceable starter this year, considering he was previously recruited by LSU, played behind Jaden Daniels, knew Jaden Daniels pretty well, but they didn't like what they were seeing in Collins. They went out and add Angeli, who I thought could have been the starter at Notre Dame. A really good add in my opinion. I think this is a guy that could be really solid and could certainly be a good key fit for this high-flying offense.
The thing about Ricky Collins, the redshirt sophomore, is he's considered a passer who's a work in progress. I think he's a great athlete, very impressive physical gifts. So I think that doesn't really fit the mold of what this offense was last year. 45 passing attempts per game by McCord, and you're going to replace him with a guy who's mainly an athlete who's a runner. So I think he's a trusted backup. I think he's a guy that might see some packages, especially in the red zone, short yardage. So I think he will certainly serve a purpose here. And again, a guy who's work in progress, but their offense would have been significant peril, I think, if he was the top dog when it comes to being the starter. Look at the running back room. The Quint Allen was phenomenal. He's in the NFL now. Yazin Willis, he had an explosive touchdown run versus UNLV. That's pretty much it. The remainder of the year, he didn't see the field at all. 226-pounder from Newark. He's going to be a power back, though. Will Nixon enters his 5th year of college football, barely seeing the field. He's now at his 3rd different school. His dad, of course, the offensive coordinator. True sophomores, Malachi James and Jaden Hart, both of them being X3 stars in last year's class. So a few different options. The loss of Allen, a dual threat back, is going to be felt. I don't really love this running back room, Nick. I'd like to see the younger guys get involved to maybe sway my opinion, and that's, 3 true sophomores you have. All of them are going to be serviceable, I think. Willis, though, he had one good play last year, and they didn't really use him the rest of the year, which I didn't really understand. But Allen was indeed a workhorse. This year it's going to be a by-committee approach.
Yeah, by committee approach, it certainly does concern me a little bit here. I don't think they have this top end talent they had in LaQuinn Allen last year. I think Willis could be the number one back coming into the season, could be half decent, 130 yards, and that aforementioned score for him last year. Will Nixon had below 100 yards. A couple younger guys here. Definitely worried about the running back room here. I think they're playing behind a weak O line as well, so it's certainly not helping this offense. I think they'll struggle to run the ball last year, which is something they did last year. They struggled to run the ball below 100 yards per game. They'll probably be at a similar number again this year. I'm not super high on this rushing attack. Obviously, a pass first offense, so that's going to be the key for this unit overall. I don't love what they have on the ground. Definitely a weaker unit.
It wasn't from a lack of effort either. They still had 400 plus carries as a team, only 3.1 yards per carry. They could not hit 150 yards once in the regular season. They barely toppled that mark against Wazoo in the bowl game. So I want to see Ricky Collins get out there, Nick. If that's his specialty and he can run the ball, he doesn't need to convert to running back or anything. I want to see those special packages, though, because if we can add that extra element to our offense and still remain pass heavy, man, we might be able to exceed what we did last year.
Yeah, I think it might be certainly a smart move for this offensive coordinating group between Mike Johnson and Jeff Nixon to kind of bring out Ricky Collins, get him involved in the offense. I'm sure they're having that discussions with him. He's a guy that could profile into a really good runner, similar to his aforementioned his friend Jaden Daniels, who he was behind at LSU. I'd love to see them get involved because I just don't know if they have enough depth in the running back room.
I look at the wide receiver group. Last year's historic group gets back three familiar faces. Darrell Gill had 570 yards on 31 grabs, had two 140-yard games late in the year. Justice Ross Simmons was banged up most of the season, had a big game versus Virginia Tech, 4 grabs for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a talented guy at 6'3", 212. He's going to impress this year. Umari Hatcher had some big games early in the season, 3 straight 60-plus yard games, matter of fact, before getting hurt. Then he essentially fell to the bottom of the rotation. So I love what they returned. These guys are all going to be big-time producers. Went to the portal to get Jonte Cook, an ex-5 star who's been all over the place. No playing time yet to his name. There's a reason why he's bounced around everywhere, so I'm not going to get excited about him just yet. Tyshawn Russell comes over from South Carolina. Only saw a few snaps back in 2023. Emmanuel Ross used his red shirt only catching passes in 1 game, and that was 4 of them for 78 yards versus Pittsburgh in that blowout. You also have 3 redshirt freshmen, and then a 3-star Darius Johnson making up the room. And, of course, Jamie Trimble has big shoes to fill at tight end. He's a sophomore. Again, I love this room, Nick. I know Pena left late, but they still returned 3 guys from last year's group, and every single one of them can play ball.
Losing Pena certainly stung late in the cycle. I thought he was going to be really good to get back. It would have made this an A-plus wide receiving room. Definitely drops it closer to A-minus, but I still like what they have here. They lost Ernad Gadsden at tight end as well, who was a phenomenal player for them last year, but I like what they have. I think Gill's a great player, 570 for them last year, 18.4 yards per grab, pretty good number there, 2 touchdowns for him as well. Amari Hatcher is probably a better asset in the red zone, 273 yards receiving, 16.1 yards to grab, 3 scores for him. Justice Ross Simmons, if he's fully healthy, he's a great weapon, 200 yards for him last year, 22.4 yards per attempt, and 2 scores. I think there's some solid production between those guys there. I think everyone over 16 yards per grab is pretty good out of what they return. They bring Jonte Cook in, who was at Texas. He didn't really do anything for them, but he was a high-level player. He did have 2 touchdowns last year. They're hoping to get something out of him in the slot. Tyshawn Russell will be fighting for that spot in the slot as well. He had a touchdown last year. Maybe they'll find a way to get something out of those 2 guys there. Tremble's an interesting tight end they return, who was a true freshman last year. Didn't really play a whole lot, but they have some high upside belief in him. 6'4", 210. Could be an interesting prospect. I still like what they have. Emmanuel Ross is not bad. Jalen Hornsby could be solid. Darius Johnson is a freshman they're pretty high on that could get some reps in the slot as well. Overall, still a strength in this offense. I like this pass game. I do like what they return. 3 solid players to get back in Ross Simmons, Gill, and Hatcher.
Now we look at this offensive line for the Qs. They dipped into the portal to fill a lot of these starting voids. Left tackle, the only returning starter, and Demetrius Witherspoon, who was about average. He had allowed 5 sacks on nearly 500 dropbacks. He was inconsistent, had some bad struggles at times. He is 6'7", 330, so a behemoth of a tackle there. Zach Rice didn't do anything at 3 years at UNC, likely the fill-in at left guard. They picked up Austin Collins at center, who was an outstanding 2-year starter at right guard for Louisville, so he does have flexibility. TJ Ferguson, 6'4", 330, was at FSU in Alabama previously, but never played. 6'8", 345 is Cam Pringle. He also didn't play for South Carolina, but is expected to slide into the starting lineup at right tackle. Group honestly isn't all that good as they're young on the 2 deep with transfers mostly not seeing much action at all outside of Collins. I think the offensive line's on the decline for 2025, but a lot of these guys, again, they were at previous high-level destinations, and they have an abundance of size here, so I think if they can get the right group in there and really start to click, they might be something special, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and be conservative, though, and expect a bit of a decline on this side of the offense.
Yeah, I'm be conservative as well because it's just tough to replace, 4 of your 5 guys on the offensive line with transfers. I don't love doing that necessarily. I think Rice, Campbell could be, or Collins that is, could be okay. Ferguson, wonder if he can finally get some things going. Pringles, same deal at right tackle. Maybe Witherspoon can just take that big step forward at left tackle. Overall, I'm still weak on this O-line. I think this is definitely the biggest weakness of this offense. It's going to be tough to run the ball behind a bad O-line. As long as they can protect Angeli and give him time in the pocket, I think this offense will still be operating at a high click. But I am worried about this O-line. I'm certainly expecting regression. How much of a regression, though? That's kind of the biggest thing. You have to kind of wait and see. If they take a huge step back, it could certainly negatively affect this offense. But if it's a minuscule step back, they could still be able to fire at a full cylinders in terms of throwing the ball.
Look at the offensive verdict. As much as I love everything we talked about, I think the Q's offense certainly won't be on the level it was last season. I still think they can have one of the stronger passing attacks in the country due to the volume, the skill at wide receiver, and I think Angeli has strong upside. They're going to need to focus on getting more of the run game and the offensive line to make sure it avoids a massive downturn. Good group here, though. I really think they can play at an A- level. I'm going to be conservative, of course, because I do still have concerns, and we're putting a lot of weight on Angeli's shoulders, but I think at the end of the day, we're going to be proven right on how successful this group is.
It's not hard to expect regression to the mean for Syracuse, considering they lose a top 10 Heisman vote-getting quarterback, a great running back, and the top 2 receiving targets from last year, the number 1 passing offense in the nation at 370 yards per game. But how much of a regression is going to be? If they can still run the ball at a similar number, find a way to get above 100 yards per game on the ground, and if Angeli is, even close enough to what McCord was able to do last year and make this still a top 10, top 15 passing attack, they should still be able to win a lot of close games. They scored 34 points per game last year. That was a pretty solid mark. They can clear the 30 mark. I think they'll be really solid for this offense with Angeli under center. Hopefully they get Ricky Collins involved, who's got some really strong legs. Hopefully the O-line doesn't take too big of a step back here. I'm expecting a regression, but just can you control that regression and don't make it too bad for Syracuse? That could really go a long way. This offense won't be as high-flying as it was last year, but still expect a pass-heavy approach that will be able to put some points on the board.
And I move to the defensive side of the ball for the Qs, and I was quite shocked to see them be this poor on this side of the ball, giving up almost 30 points per game. Now they're only going to return 2 starters on what was a talented bunch. Start with the defensive line. You look at Kevin Jabity, got hurt 5 games into the year. He's about average, but he was a quality run stopper back in 2023. David Oma-Pariola saw 150-plus snaps, wasn't all that bad, to 4 TFL late in the year. David Reese, I'm a big fan of his. He was able to accomplish a lot at Cal, 13 sacks in 2 years. Pretty sure he started his career at Florida as well. He's also a really good run defender. He's going to be an alpha for the Qs. Dennis Jacquez, he was a good run defender, nearly 300-plus snaps last season. The interior defensive line, they're going to get back Dion Wilson Jr. He was also limited to only 5 games. Hasn't really done much in his career, though. They added some good size from Marshall and Chris Thomas. He's 6'6", 325. Wasn't that good last season, though. Rashad Perry was a quality rotational run stopper at 290 pounds. And then a 2-year starter from Boston College and George Rooks. He was no good for them, though. I think this is a quality group. They have some depth, some size. Not sure how talented they'll be outside of Jabity and Reese, but maybe that's all you need against some of the mid-tier competition in this conference, Nick. I think this will be a quality group.
The defense struggled in games last year against some of their tougher opponents on the schedule, some of the weaker opponents as well. Against Stanford, a game they should have ended up winning, but mental mistakes on defense and inability to get off the field and give up 4th down opportunities to the Stanford Cardinal ended up losing that game in the Dome, a game I attended, and it certainly was sloppy on defense. When you look at what they have on the defensive line here, I think there are some positive pieces. Dennis Jacquez Jr. is a good player. 23 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, not bad. Rashad Perry, 17 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, pretty decent numbers from him. He could be good this year. Dion Wilson, if he's fully healthy, he might be a solid asset. 13 total tackles and a tackle for loss for him last year. They went to the portal and added some interesting pieces. David Reese was a great add from Cal. 22 total tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks at QB hurry. He had 8 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, and 4 QB hurries in 2023 for Florida. He's a guy that's been really solid. I think he's got high upside. I like what they added in Chris Thomas from Marshall. 42 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a sack, and 4 QB hurries. He could be really solid. George Rooks, I think, was a decent add as well from Boston College. 26 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a sack, QB hurry. He had 4 of those in 2023. They went to the portal, added some depth. They have some decent returning players as well. Kevin Jabby should be solid as well off the edge. I think he gets some good pressure. Overall, this is a unit I think is decent enough. I think they'll be able to get some good depth and rotation here. Some solid pieces overall. Should be a decent run defense. They were solid at times at that mark, just around 150 yards per game. Could be a similar unit again this year.
Yeah, and I go and look at the middle of this defense. Like you said, the run defense at times was good. They also had some brutal performances, like against Virginia Tech and Boston College. But other than that, though, they were pretty consistent. They did well against some of the tougher offenses as well. And I look at linebacker Derek McDonald. He's going to step into a starting lineup. He was one of the top rotational backers with 400 snaps, was sturdy in coverage. Didn't really stand out in any other area though, so he'll need to improve. Gary Bryant, on the other hand, he was elite in all areas over at the FCS level for South Dakota. Another happy with that addition there. Anwar Sparrow was quite poor in 150 snaps of work. A handful of other guys in the rotation saw a few snaps each last year, like James Hurd and Zaya Moultrie-Goddard. But proven depth is very limited. I just don't think this is a very good group in the middle. You're really going to need progression from McDonald and Bryant to prove he can carry over that strong play to the ACC. If those things don't happen, they're probably going to regress big time.
Yeah, definitely a weaker linebacking core. I'm certainly worried about this unit. McDonald, 55 total tackles, a tackle for loss for him last year. They bring in Bryant from South Dakota, who was a menace all over the field for him. They're the guy they're hoping can transition well. Sparrow wasn't great in his reps either. Definitely concerned about this linebacking unit. The depth and talent overall is not great. Gary Bryant, they're taking a gamble on him. I hope it pays off, but I'm still concerned about his productivity and the way that he'll be able to adjust to a higher pace of play.
I moved to the secondary for Syracuse, and this is a group that's certainly disappointing because I thought they were highly talented. 82nd in passing yards per game. I felt like they could have been one of the better groups in the country. And you're going to go ahead and look at who they have. Starting with the corners, Greg Delane saw 100 snaps last season. He was all right. Davian Kerr saw 200-plus snaps, was average as well. Pick up a good addition in UGA, Chris Peel. He's going to reunite with Fran Brown, being a guy that has a lot of upside as an ex-4-star recruit. Devin Grant was a quality starter out of the slot. He's going to return to his post. Safety group's going to get back a veteran in Deuce Chestnut, who had a great season. He's been, having a great career for the Orange. Barry Buxton is expected to start into the starting lineup. He saw 350-plus snaps last season, but was well below average. I think the secondary's potential due to returning starters and the add appeal. They also have a 4-star true freshman, Demetrius Samuel, who might get involved. I'm just not all that high on this group. Stepped up when they needed to, but for the most part gave up plenty of yards, and they were also 122nd in opponent completion rating. So a lot of red flags here across the board. Fran Brown, of course, the ex-DB coach for Georgia, so he knows what he's doing, and I think over time they'll be fine. But for 2025, not all that high on them. Maybe as the season goes on, we'll see progression, but right now, kind of a bleak outlook.
Yeah, weak outlook, not the greatest unit on paper. Some talented pieces, but just not enough here overall. Deuce Chestnut, 62 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, a sack, a pick, 5 pass breakups. He's your best player on this defense, a very talented player. Devin Grant, 56 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a pick, 3 pass breakups. He wasn't bad at all. Barry Buxton, he's got to be better this year. 22 total tackles, a tackle for loss for him. He's got to improve. Davion Kerr, same deal. He's got to improve. Certainly 14 total tackles, a pick for him last year. He needs to show some improvement. Chris Peel, they're pretty excited on the ad from him from Georgia, high-end talent who was a 4-star of the Charlotte, North Carolina area. They're hoping to get him. Demetrius Samuel, a true freshman that they expect to start. I'm hearing from my people upstate. They think he'll be able to start from coming out of high school in Florida. They're hoping they can get him on the field early on, but tough to throw a guy out there as a true freshman at a starting cornerback position here. I don't love that potentially you're having 2 new corners that are not familiar with the program, a transfer and a true freshman. Definitely concerned about this unit. They struggled against the pass as well at times last year as the defense struggled in a lot of regards. Definitely concerned about the long-term progression of this unit and some of the talent they have right now.
Looking at the defensive verdict, again, it was honestly quite shocking to see how bad they were last season. They had good players and potential across the board. Now they're going to replace most of the unit, and outside of the defensive line, I'm not really feeling all that great about the depth and the skill. That just doesn't appear all that ideal. I think the secondary has a few pieces that can help them out, and they'll need to, as they won't be as good when it comes to defending the pass. The grade I gave them was a C+, which is honestly not that great if this team wants to continue to stay hot at the top of this conference.
Yeah, C+ is not going to get you back to 9-10 wins. They're just not good enough on defense. They struggled at times last year. The defense was certainly a liability, and I think it's going to be a liability again this year. I like what they have on the defensive line, but the linebacking core and the secondary pose some issues. I think the secondary profile is to be decent in the future, but they'll certainly struggle this year. I think this is a big concern potentially. The defense will hold this team back. I don't really love a lot of the pieces they replaced. I don't love a lot of the depth in some of the positions, particularly the secondary at linebacking core. Definitely concerned about this defense upstate.
Looking at the schedule and the prediction, the Qs are coming off a historic season, and despite losing a lot, momentum is definitely in their favor. I think the offense with the add of Angeli and some of those playmaking pass catchers from last season are going to allow them to really have a good passing attack, and defense honestly seems in store for a big regression. And the schedule is tough. Compared to last year, it was certainly a pretty easy schedule. I think they could have competed with some of the top dogs in the conference. I mean, they beat Miami, right? So I think they certainly could have had a good record even if they had this schedule last year. But I think here, I have them picking off two teams that are going to be good. Duke and Pitt to clinch a spot in the postseason. It's going to be tough. If they don't shine through the year once again, though, I think they could certainly be in for a pretty poor record. This will be interesting, Nick, because I think Fran Brown's a great head coach. I'd love to see the momentum continue. I think 6-6 would be a great year, another postseason appearance. But again, this is quite tough. Miami, Notre Dame, Clemson, those guys are all going to be in the playoff most likely, right? SMU, they were in the playoff last year. You have Georgia Tech, who was beating these playoff teams last year. And you also have Tennessee, who also made the CFP, Nick. I mean, you're playing high-caliber opponents almost on a weekly basis here if you're Syracuse. And again, Duke and Pitt are going to be really good this season. So 4 wins is quite frankly on the docket, which would be sad because I think they'll be a lot better than that. They're going to have to pick off somebody here or there. So many road games, though. It's just going to be atrocious this year for Syracuse. It's going to be hard. Can't wait to see how it works out, though. 6-6 I'm hoping for, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see a lot less.
I certainly want to say that I'm keeping a close eye on Syracuse. My sister will be starting to go to school there shortly there. Shout out Haley. Looking forward to going to watch some games with you upstate. I like what this team can do as a native New Yorker. I've always been keeping a keen eye on this team. And I really love what Fran Brown did in year one. I think he's doing a lot of great work on the recruiting trail. He's really putting deep recruiting ties down in South Jersey, where they're getting a lot of talent from some of the good high schools in the state of New Jersey. He's building some recruiting ties in the South as well after his stint at Georgia. So I think he's a great coach for the future. I don't think anyone should be upset if they have a bad season here because the schedule is brutal. Last year the schedule was easy. They still found a way to lose to Stanford at home, get absolutely torched in a game against Pitt where Kyle McCord was seeing ghost all night on a Thursday night, and struggle on the road against a bad Boston College team. So I think that kind of masks some of the deficiencies in this team where they're able to pick off some of those better teams by getting some surprise wins at NC State, against Miami, against Georgia Tech early in the season. The schedule's not easy this year. That game against Tennessee on week 1 in Atlanta is quite intriguing. I think maybe they could find a way to cover the spread there because there's a lot of question marks about Tennessee's quarterback situation with Nico bolting out the door. So keep an eye on that game if you're looking to bet on spreads potentially. But outside of that, I think the schedule is tough. Right? I think they will beat Pitt and North Carolina. Those are some key wins. Duke as well. But they got travel to Clemson, Georgia Tech, Miami, Notre Dame, SMU. I mean, that's a gauntlet of road trips there. Plus the Tennessee game is a de facto road game with the fact that the fans will travel from Knoxville to Atlanta, a lot closer to Atlanta. Knoxville is then upstate New York. A tough schedule, right? I think if they get 6-6, go to a bowl game, you got to be really happy with that. You're a Syracuse fan, and give some Fran Brown some love and some appreciation for that. If they miss a bowl game, I'm not panicking yet. I think this is still a guy that's really young, energetic head coach that's doing a lot with this program. At 43 years old, he's got a lot of room left to grow as a head coach. You saw a lot of progress early on for a guy that was a bit of a gamble considering he had only been a DB's coach and had never really been a DC other than a brief stint as a co-DC at Temple. I like Fran Brown a lot. I like what this team can do. I think Angeli's a great quarterback, can certainly step up and be solid. Just think the depth on defense and the depth on offense will hold this team back. Definitely not a great year, but I think the future is still very bright in upstate New York.
That's going to be it for today's episode. If you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.